everybody, we'll get on with the subject in just a second, but first I need to let you know that the machine I'm riding today is a Super Soco CUX Ducati edition. Is it a Super Soco? Is it Ducati? This is officially licensed? Who knows? But it is an electric, a 50cc equivalent, and today I need to range test it for my review. I've got this on loan from Super Soco to do some videos and a review on, and I thought, well, if I'm going to be on it for a few hours today, or a couple of hours, let's hit one of the big subjects I've been wanting to do for a while. I've been doing a lot of research on this, and hopefully I can give you mostly facts, not opinions. Because when it comes to talking about electric machines, you're getting an awful lot of opinions and very few facts. Oh, here we go. Electric vs hydrogen, the facts that I understand. Now, I will first say here, I am a bit of a nerd. I love science, and when I research things into great depth, but I will never present them as absolute facts, because I am smart enough to know that no man knows everything, and when you don't know what you don't know, mistakes lead in. But I try to do things by the best way I can, and give you better answers than, well, as I say, a load of opinions. I've been reviewing electric bikes quite a lot recently, and through doing that I hear a lot of opinions from people talking about electric bikes, the future, what will and won't work, why this will and won't work. You know, it's all been kind of just discussions about possible futures, because motorcycles were not added onto the 2030 ban for internal combustion engines. And I talked about this only about a month ago, and I said, I know they're not on it at the moment, it might have been a couple of months at this point, I know they're not on it at the moment, but they will be soon. And I think some people said that won't happen. Well, it's just happened. I'm afraid that the death of the petrol motorcycle has been dated. It's going to happen in 2035, not 2030. Sale of new internal combustion engine, petrol and diesel internal combustion engine motorcycles will be prohibited. So no more. Now, a lot of people say, that's not going to happen. It can never happen. I think it's going to happen, okay? As much as you might not think it's going to, I'm pretty sure it's going to. Partly because it's global agreements, not just UK agreements, so it's a bit tricky for them to back out. But of course, they could, so, there'll be comments saying that. Anyway, well, let's get into the fundamentals of it. A lot of people say that electric bikes, pure electrics like this with a lithium-ion battery, are not the future of, motorcycles. It's going to be hydrogen. First, we'll talk about electric, what people say about electrics that means it's just not possible for them to be the future. Mining lithium for the batteries is, it's very damaging to the environment, etc., etc. This is basically true, to my understanding. Not in all cases, but it can be. But whether it's more damaging overall is another thing. You can also recycle and refine lithium, just like other metals, but it is a little tricky to my understanding. So I don't think, lithium is our problem. There's plenty of it in the world to be used, and so many devices these days also use it that, sure, they're going to have to increase its uses, but how many millions of smartphones are there out there full of lithium that aren't, the lithium's just sat there waiting to be recycled or unused? I'm not going to get into that side of it, because that, yes, you can see how many steps it takes to get that lithium back could be a problem for the environment, whatever. People say that electric bikes take too long to charge, and that's one of the advantages of hydrogens, is you can fill them up nice and quick. This is true and not true at the same time. The fastest charging electric bikes out there at the moment that use I think it's the DC charging, can do a full charge in about half an hour, and you can get over 100 miles out of that. They're extremely expensive is another thing that people will say, and yes, of course they are. They're a new technology. More people use them, more people buy them, the cheaper they get over time. That's just a fact of the way that the world works, in the same way that, as I've said before a million times now, CD players used to be £1,500, then in just a few years, because lots of people picked up the format because it won that format war, they became like, but you could buy a personal miniaturized version for like £15. When there's enough of them being sold, the technology progresses fast and the price comes down. But we do need competition in the sector, because that's what really helps bring down prices and bring value to the customers. There aren't that many electric motorcycle manufacturers at the moment, and the big four haven't shown their hands yet. Secretly, they kind of have. Like Suzuki's done some very quiet trials in London with some Bergman 125s that were converted to were hydrogen cell powered. They looked like normal Bergmans, but they were hydrogen. And they gave those to the Met Police, to my understanding, for 6 months, and they used them, and they absolutely loved them. So yeah, great. But it's a small scooter sort of thing. Now, people say about electrics being silent and how that's not a good thing. I've done a video on that called The Sound of Silence, but whether you have a hydrogen fuel cell bike or an electric bike that's straight electric from batteries, it makes the same noise basically, because I'm not sure if everyone realises this, but hydrogen bikes are still electric bikes. They just convert the hydrogen into electricity for the motor to run. You can have internal combustion engines using hydrogen, but we will get into why you don't want to do that later on when we start talking about efficiency. Another thing I'll hit on electrics before I move on to the hydrogens, because that's the interesting one here, because that's what everyone keeps pointing at and saying, oh, well, that's obviously way better than electric, is in batteries, is infrastructure. People say there is not the infrastructure in the country to be able to run electric bikes. It can't happen. Well, how does electricity get to you? Down a wire that already exists under the ground and that goes into every building in the country. The infrastructure is already in place. There isn't, a hydrogen delivery infrastructure just sitting underground ready for us to use right now. The way that hydrogen is produced and the way that it's used, this is a big point of it. You can't just pipe hydrogen underneath the ground, and this hurts its efficiency massively. Yes, there will need to be infrastructure increases. Yes, there needs to be a lot more charging stations. Yes, there is a problem for people who don't have a garage or off-street parking or something like that to charge their machine. For them, it would be almost impossible to do that unless they had removable batteries, and not all bikes are going down the removable battery route, and even if they are, they're not necessarily ideal. This is a very small removable battery, but it only does 35 miles an hour because it's a CVT at 16 equivalent, and it's only got about a 40-mile range, or whatever I'm actually going to find out today. So upgrading the electricity network to handle the power, I don't think is going to be the end of the world. It's doable. Do remember our electrical system can run much higher voltages and everything that it already currently does. They adjust it for its needs, and as time goes on, needs come down due to more energy efficient fridges and all that sort of stuff. Because if we get everything coming from electricity, all of our power, and we make each of those things the most efficient, you end up with really good efficiency and cleanness, because you get mass production of it, mass use of it, and then mass savings of it. So I do think that even though our power uses are going to go up, they're also going to proportionately go down as we get more energy efficient devices and things. Okay, so let's get into hydrogen, and I'm not going to get into super depth here, there's just some basics, and I'm not sure if everyone or many realise this about hydrogen. And it's one of the reasons I think that it can be used in the future. I do think it will be a use, particularly in things like, long haul trucks, in planes, because, they want to try and make that more efficient. Just there's many positions where hydrogen works better than an electric battery, but not always. So what you do to create hydrogen, although there are several different methods, there's like grey and blue and different versions, these all come from fossil fuels, and the majority of hydrogen production now is done using fossil fuels. There is green hydrogen, which is made by using electricity from renewable sources like wind and stuff like that, but it represents a very small amount of the hydrogen that's being produced right now. And also when we get into the efficiencies, you're going to see why this is a problem for hydrogen in my mind. So, to make hydrogen generally, there are many different ways, but I think the majority of the hydrogen is made, as I say, through electrolysis. Basically, you get a big tank of water, you put an anode and a cathode in it, 2 electrodes basically, and off of one of them you're going to get hydrogen, and you pass a current through that. Off one of them you're going to get hydrogen, off the other one you're going to get oxygen. You might say that sounds a little bit like an electrolysis bath for like getting rust off of stuff. And that's exactly what it is, because when you do that, you do have to be careful because it's producing oxygen and hydrogen split. So if you take that and mix it together and have a little, and it can gather in a room, you've got a fantastic mix of oxygen and hydrogen. Extremely flammable. So there we go, we've created our hydrogen from electricity. Most of it came from fossil fuels, but let's say it didn't. Let's say it came from renewables. Okay, converting that electricity into hydrogen is about 80% efficient, which means you've lost 20% of your electricity you've put in already, just turning it into hydrogen. So now we want to get that hydrogen from the place that's created it, but let's say that's done at the refinery. They're then going to have to store that in tanks, and then that's going to have to be put onto trucks, which is going to have to take it, probably hydrogen-powered trucks, take it around the country like we do with fossil fuels, deliver it to the new hydrogen stations they've built with their new underground tanks. By the way, these tanks are going to be very high, well, not necessarily that high pressure, because they might be able to make them just giant, but they're going to, the problem is, when you need to store a lot of gas, you either have a really big tank that you keep at a lower pressure, which is obviously much safer, or you have much smaller tanks, which are much higher pressures, in which case it's not nearly as safe. Sure, it's not necessarily that dangerous, but a 20 psi tank is far safer than a 10,000 psi tank. So, we've now gone and we've got our hydrogen out, from the electrolysis, driven it all the way around to the country, to the places that need it. We've put it into the new hydrogen stations we've built. They've had an entirely new revamp, and then you put that into your car. Now, it is true that the energy density of hydrogen is massively more than lithium, but energy density and energy efficiency are two different things, and people don't realise this, it would seem. You see, I've asked an awful lot of questions from people to get opinions on electric bikes, knowing quite full well what's probably going to get said, and then I'm listening to the most common arguments, researching to find out what's true and false, and then giving the answers to you best I can. The reason I do this is because, and I'll explain, this is why I am like I am. When I was a kid, I was told things by people about how the world worked, and that was all wrong. So because I kept feeling embarrassed saying to people like, oh, it works this way, and they're like, no, it doesn't, and then I look into it and I found out I was wrong. From that point onwards, I stopped listening to anyone else, and in the sense of like people telling me things, and I did my research to find stuff out. And through that, I've learned about many different sciences and stuff. If you watch my channel, you'll probably have picked up by now that I am a total bloody nerd, and I love it. I just feel like I understand this world way better, like on a molecular level of how everything works around you, how the systems work, how everything intertwines. Of course, it generally ends up making you feel very, very misanthropic, but it is what it is. Anyway, so we have got our hydrogen, and we have put it into our hydrogen-powered motorcycle, for instance. Now, some people, as I say, take the idea of a hydrogen as that it's going to have a hydrogen internal combustion engine, as in the hydrogen gas will actually power a piston-driven engine. Now, there are some problems with that because it's not very efficient doing that. You see, now I think this would come into the laws of conservation of energy and entropy, in fact, that basically when a petrol vehicle goes along, the energy from that petrol, which is very dense, and it's one of the reasons why it doesn't matter about all the noise and blah, 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 the energy from that converts into different things. You have the motion of the car, that's a lot of the power used out of the fuel, but you also have heat. Heat is the heat of an engine literally is wasted energy from the fuel. The sound from the engine is wasted energy from the fuel. Everything other than what makes the thing go is wasted energy from the fuel. So the reality is it's better to use hydrogen fuel cells, which of course a lot of people know about and are screaming as being the answer for the future. However, I do see a few issues with hydrogen fuel cells that maybe people haven't really considered. Now, to start with, as I say, people say hydrogen is the future to me when I review electric bikes. And I say, well, fine, if hydrogen is the future, let me go and review one. Oh, I can't. There aren't any. There just aren't. I think in the world, in 2019, there was something like 7,500 hydrogen-powered vehicles out there, compared to might mean 70,000, but the point was there was like 7.5 million electrics. Electric is already so here, it really would be interesting to see that completely die away and a switch to hydrogen happen in the next 14 years. As I say, I think electric and hydrogen will both be used. But sorry, I digress. Let's get back to the fuel cell. Okay, the fuel cell, the way it works is you put hydrogen under high pressure in one side and a catalyst in the middle, which is normally made of platinum, And I know people say about lithium being difficult to get hold of and expensive. I think platinum's a little bit worse, although obviously catalytic converters from cars are full of platinum and we can recycle them back out of that, and for every, you know, car that's knocked out to put a new hydrogen in place, you can get the platinum from its catalytic converter. So that may not be such an issue. You won't have to mine that platinum, but it's still a thing that's needed. It's still an expense on the price, and you need quite a bit of it, to my understanding, for the fuel cell. So you put the hydrogen into the fuel cell, electrons are ripped off of it, which go into powering the motor, and the rest of it is basically passed through and lost. Now, it is true, as I say, the energy density of hydrogen is something like 260 times, you know, so like pound for pound. Like if you had a kilo of lithium-ion battery versus a kilo of hydrogen, is 260 something times more energy dense, so you can get many, many more miles out of it. That's true. But that doesn't mean it's that efficient. You see, the thing is, when you get down to it, the efficiency of hydrogen, when it's wheels on the road, is about 30%. The problem is when you go from wind to electricity to hydrogen gas to fuel cell to movement, you are putting so many steps in there that energy is getting lost everywhere. The efficiency is being lost everywhere. I mean, you could liken it to going on a trip to buy antiques. You make £100 profit from those antiques, but it costs you £200 in fuel. It's not net efficient. And although, yes, it will work and it is more energy dense, it's not necessarily that much better than electrics in the sense of battery powered ones. There is another side to this, which, you know, people will say about electrics scare them because they've, you know, 18650 batteries can blow up. I mean, why are people scared of 18650 batteries? I have no idea. It's not like I made a video screwing a screw through one and it absolutely, whoa. A conflagration was definitely quite vigorous. Now, I will say here, I'm talking about hydrogen and electric motorcycles in general, because they're a very different beast due to the size of them as to what's going to be viable for that thing. If you want to have decent miles on a hydrogen, you're going to need a decent pressurized tank. Now, some of these tanks run up to 10,000 psi. If you're not aware how dangerous 10,000 psi can be when it gets out of the thing that was holding it in, just be sure it's pretty bad. And when that 10,000 psi stuff coming out of it is hydrogen, it could get even worse, because now you've got high pressure gas, which is dangerous enough as is, but it's also flammable. Highly, highly, highly flammable. So my point is this: on a petrol bike, you have a crash, the tank gets ruptured. There is, you know, flames from the fuel on the side of the bike. Generally, unless the tank itself is obliterated, it isn't a ginormous fire, because petrol won't burn inside a fuel tank. Like, this whole thing of it like exploding, yeah, you'd have to get the stoichiometry of the gases inside the tank correct, and normally it's so high in fuel vapor, it's never going to light, which is why you see people lighting the top of a motorcycle fuel tank. Do not do this! Do not do this! And it won't ignite the fuel inside, unless air gets in there, in which case it could. But my point is, generally when bikes crash, they catch fire due to a ruptured tank. It's normally a small fired affair. When a battery cell goes up, oh, that's a more interesting thing, because you can't really put them out. But because they're made up of individual cells, 18650s in the case of this bike I'm testing, and the CPX, the other electric from Super Circle I'm currently got on loan to be doing testing on, which is the 125cc equivalent, is using pouch cells, but they're individual cells. So when one cell pops, it then will set off the next one, and you basically get like a firecracker effect. It can be extremely vigorous, or it can be a bit more drawn out, where literally it's like, or popcorn even, where it's just pop, 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 cells going one at a time. Very difficult to put out, very hot fires, will set fire to a lot of stuff around it. Now, if you consider the explosive potential of 10,000 or 5,000 psi of hydrogen in an enclosed space like your garden, or your garage or something, if it leaks, it's a very different matter. There's no real possibility of electric or petrol to have those giant explosions. And for this reason, to my understanding, in some places, it is illegal for hydrogen-powered vehicles of any kind to go through tunnels. Because if one of them crashes and ruptures and puts that much hydrogen inside the tunnel in a confined space, you could have one hell of a blowout. You know, Lynx Africa in a milk bottle with a lighter is nothing. This thing's going to scorch your fingers way more than that. Now, I'm not trying to scaremonger with this. I have no want of any of these things to work or not work. I just want to have fun riding machines with two wheels that go along. I love petrol, I truly do, and I will be sad when it goes. But I know that the bikes before that, before 2030, will still be legal afterwards. I suspect there'll still be people selling them for like track use and off-road use. Now, obviously, that's becoming less and less because we don't have tracks, and every bit of off-road is getting turned into house around this place. But whatever, green England is big and green still. It's progression. I am never going to be one to be like, I don't want to see progression. If we didn't progress as humans, we'd still be throwing turds at each other. Well, we are still throwing. Let's face it, we've actually more regressed to throwing turds at each other. Sometimes even paying people to throw turds at you. But the point is, progression is not stoppable. It happens. Don't basically be a Luddite, is what I'm getting at here. Everyone's lost all their jobs because now, there's no petrol machines. Well, someone's going to have to maintain those electric ones. Like with the Luddites, we've lost all our jobs because we can't do weaving anymore. Those machines need fixing. Stuff needs taking around. Re-educate, find a better job. Now, I'm not saying that like a mechanic should just give up on his life's career and just learn to do something else, because why should he? And he doesn't need to, because mechanics are going to have so much more work in the future. Because everyone's going to want to keep their petrol bike on the road, because when it stops working, what are you going to do? You can't buy a new one. And if you have a crash, you're probably not going to want to go through insurance, because as you know, all you have to do is literally put a little tiny scratch back here on a bike, and the insurance company goes, it's right off. Definitely right off. And then you buy it back for like 7p, and then you fix it for like 12p, and then it's done. That's what I did with my first bike when it got written off the first time. Yes, the first time. And continuing on the thing with the high pressure gas tank, assuming that said gas tank is under your seat, I don't want to be ejected off of a bike. Again, I'm not scaremongering, this is just realities. Electric batteries can't eject you. 10,000 of PSI of compressed gas could, depending on how it hits. If you have a crash, and you have, say for instance, a gas tank a hydrogen gas tank between your legs, and it ruptures, I think that's got the possibility of taking limbs off. Like, it's that serious a deal. A lot of people talk about hydrogens for all of its positives, and I never hear any of the logical, obvious negatives that were going to come along with that. So, I mean, does that cover it? As I say, I do think the hydrogen will have its uses in the future, and I do think that electric will have its uses in the future. We do have to remember that there are other types of battery technology coming along. I mean, people do say, but the lithium. We don't always have to use lithium. And of course, people always say the cobalt, because you need cobalt as well for the batteries, and that's harder to get than the lithium, to be fair. There are other options of batteries being developed, technologies. There's also solid-state batteries and stuff they're looking at. Now, I haven't looked a huge amount into that, and, I don't know if that's going to work yet. I'm aware of the technologies. I'm actually trying to, keep up with what's happening in the world, in science, in what's going on around us and why we're doing things, but also understand things from a perspective of fact rather than people's generally opinion, and very often wrong opinions. So much misinformation is out there about electrics and hydrogens and all of this sort of stuff that it's very, very difficult to find the truth. And also you'll find that when you talk about stuff like this, someone will just go, Engineering Explained did a video on this, for instance. Engineering Explained, good channel, watching it for quite a long time, gets things wrong sometimes. But also, I think if you're saying, if you can't argue the point with someone yourself, if you have to just say, well, this person is the person that I believe, their opinion's the one that I believe, so I'm going to, here's the dude who'll tell you the answer. I don't work like that. The amount of people that I've been introduced to and been told that this guy is an expert and realise that they don't know anything, it's just the people around them know less and believe them, is a real thing in this world. Energy production, because people say, well, where's all the power going to come from? Where is all the stations to make all this power? They say that when we're talking about electrical, bikes like this, but people don't say that about hydrogen plants. And I always think, well, where's the extra power coming from? Because this is less efficient. We will need more power going in to get the power out in the form of hydrogen. Sure, the energy density of that will be higher than the electric, but it won't be more efficient. So you're going to need more power on the grid and more things like that, rather than, putting that electric directly into the vehicle that was going to use it. Even if it isn't as good, it can still work out as a net benefit. So, as I say, energy production, where's it all going to come from? Well, obviously the UK is trying to go as green as it possibly can, and lots of energy companies are trying to go 100% green in the next few years by only using renewable sources. And we're doing pretty well compared to a few years ago, but there is a long way to go, of course. But part of what the energy companies are doing is not only trying to produce green energy, they're also trying to get people to use less energy, smart meters and stuff like that. Now, I will say here, because I've talked about smart meters in the past, I think the energy gains from people having a smart meter are very much reduced compared to how much infrastructure and how much development there had to be, and engineering and manufacture, to produce all of the smart meters they had to change in the wall of a house, and also for the monitors that they make and put inside the house. The fact is this: if you need the lights on, you have the lights on. How many of you, just leave, your TV on, your stereo on, your lights on and everything, and just not think about it? And then just go, when you get a smart monitor, go, oh my God, I'm paying £5 a day because I've left all this random stuff on. I could probably turn off this, milkshake maker that's got nothing in it at the moment, and this Maggi mix, and the microwave's just boiling water for no reason. I'm just, you know what I mean? I don't think anyone's using that much more power than they can, other than efficiencies and understanding when is good and not good times to do things. Technology Connections could talk about that as well, to do with aircon and turning your house into basically an energy battery by cooling it more at night, so you don't have to use so much aircon during the day to keep the temperatures down. Very interesting stuff. As I say, I am looking at this from many different angles, because all of this information cross and intermingles together to give you answers which are, there's provability behind them. There's more fact behind it than just going, oh, they're not going to work. Tesla? So just to finish off my thing about energy creation, I do honestly think the future, or one of the best options we have for making power, is nuclear. And I know a lot of people go, oh, Chernobyl, oh, Fukushima, shut up. Facts matter. One of the most efficient and, I think you can say, cleanest, in a net value way, ways of creating electricity is indeed nuclear. Now, yeah, of course, those disasters have happened, and when those disasters happen, the environmental impact is ginormous, and it is lasting for thousands of years. So it's kind of like a very risky situation. It'll be fine until it explodes. But we all know, if you've researched into Chernobyl, that situation was generally based off of a poorly run, outdated, I think, reactor, and they were pushing it past its limits and breaking a lot of protocols at the time, to my understanding. Fukushima was maybe not designed so well, considering they're in a country which gets tsunamis, and it was put right next to the sea, because any nuclear power plant needs an absolute shed ton of water for cooling. Now, this water never comes in contact with anything really radioactive, so the water that comes out should be non-radioactive. It shouldn't have a great difference between the water that went in and the water that came out. So I think people seem to think that I don't think they get to realise that the two systems in a reactor are separated. In fact, some cooling systems in nuclear reactors are liquid metal, like bismuth, which I've done videos on making crystals from, if you want to see those, and lead and stuff like that, because obviously the heat of a reactor is way higher than the melting point of that material, that metal, but its energy density, it's the energy it can hold because of its density, is way more. I think these stations can be made much more smartly. They can be put in much more thought out locations, managed and maintained far better. And as for the nuclear waste, well, I'm trying to remember who it is. I think it might be Switzerland or something like that, or Sweden or Finland or one of those sort of countries. They have a system basically that they have a hole. No one really knows where this hole is. It's very, very deep underground. I think it might be an old mine shaft, and it goes very deep into a core of stone, like a giant mass of stone. And they're putting their nuclear waste out there, and they are going to bury it. And no one will know where it is. And it's been scientifically, like mathematically chosen, this location, for the least likely place for anyone to dig in the future. Say that we get wiped out mostly, and in 100,000 years we don't remember the current technologies and the history of everything that's happening now, which is quite possible. It may have happened in the past. Oh god, that's a bit too conspiracy theory, isn't it? But yeah, ancient Egypt, interesting stuff. How old is it really? Old technologies we had that were rather well advanced for the time make no particular sense. But anyway, hopefully they will never find it and they'll not be able to dig it up. And also no, terrorist organisation or wherever it want to be will get hold of that material and try and make a dirty bomb. Okay, I think I'm going to end this one here because it's probably already long enough and I've covered a lot of things. And I can't cover everything. There is no way you can cover the entire spectrum of future energy use, production and everything into a less than half an hour video with every single caveat and bit covered. I just wanted to sort of explain why my opinion at the moment is I think that electric for motorcycles in the sense of a battery will be what we will have in the future, for the short term anyway. I know people don't like it, and that's fine. You can keep using your petrol machines, as will I, until the day that they stop working or they tax the fuel so highly that you can't afford to run it. Because do remember that. Petrol's not going to be the same price in 2035. When I was a kid, petrol was 78p, or was it 77p a litre. It is now considerably more than 78p a litre. Given another 14 years, add on a load more tax, yeah, it's going to start getting expensive. If you enjoy this video, hit that like button and leave a comment below with your thoughts, if you have any thoughts to add to this. As I say, I know there is an awful lot of misinformation out there at the moment. There's an awful lot of people who don't use any logical understanding or knowledge on the subject, just go with what they've heard from other people, and they keep telling me things to be factually correct that I know for a fact aren't right. But they keep spouting them at you as if they are right, and they're never going to check it because they're not that sort of person. They're not, people who I'm not worried about being right or wrong, and I don't want things to be a certain way. I want to know what the truth is. I want to know what the facts are. I want to know, how does this all work? I mean, ultimately, it's me just probably trying to understand my place in the universe. But science is the only thing that's going to explain that to me, not an angry person in the YouTube comments. Anyway, thank you for watching. Also, subscribe if you're new here, because you can see I'm getting very close to 100k, and thank you to the supporters of this channel through Patreon. I really appreciate you, and sorry I'm doing so much about electric at the moment, but I do feel like it's an important subject to be talking about while I'm passionate about it, in the sense of I'm doing the research now. Catch you next time.